The text for this sermon is from Matthew chapter 25, verse 22 and 23. He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliveredst unto me 2 talents, behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. His Lord said unto him, Well done, good and faithful servant, thou hast been faithful over a few things, I will make thee ruler over many things, enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. Welcome to Spurgeon's Sermons. If you find this sermon uplifting, be sure to subscribe to this channel. Every month, by God's grace, this YouTube channel shares the good news of Jesus Christ with tens of thousands of people all over the world. Your generous support today will enable us to continue producing daily content from the man known as the Prince of Preachers. Nearly 150 years after Charles Spurgeon preached these sermons, we are seeing God change lives through his preaching on this YouTube channel. So please, give your best gift today at princeofpreachers.com to help more people discover the transforming power of the gospel.
Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, and cometh down from the Father of lights. All that men have they must trace to the great fountain, the giver of all good. Hast thou talents? They were given thee by the God of talents. Hast thou time? Hast thou wealth, influence, power? Hast thou powers of tongue? Hast thou powers of thought? Art thou poet, statesman, or philosopher? Whatever be thy position and whatever be thy gifts, remember that they are not thine, but they are lent thee from on high. No man hath anything of his own, except his sins. We are but tenants at will. God hath put us into his estates, and he hath said, Occupy till I come. Though our vineyards bear never so much fruit, yet the vineyard belongs to the king, and though we are to take the 100 for our hire, yet King Solomon must have his 1,000. All the honor of our ability and the use of it must be unto God, because he is the giver. The parable tells us this very pointedly, for it makes every person acknowledge that his talents come from the Lord. Even the man who digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money, did not deny that his talent belonged to his master, for though his reply, Lo, there thou hast that is thine, was exceedingly impertinent, yet it was not a denial of this fact. So that even this man was ahead of those who deny their obligations to God, who superciliously toss their heads at the very mention of obedience to their Creator, and spend their time and their powers rather in rebellion against him than in his service. Oh, that we were all wise to believe and to act upon this most evident of all truths, that everything we have received from the Most High. Now, there are some men in the world who have but few talents. Our parable says, one had 5, and another 2. To them I shall address myself this morning, and I pray that the few pointed things I may say may be blessed of God to their edification or rebuke. First, I shall notice the fact that there are many persons who have but few talents, and I will try to account for God's dispensing but few to them. Secondly, I shall remind them that even for these few talents they must be brought to account. And thirdly, I shall conclude by making the comforting observation that if our few talents be rightly used, neither our own conscience nor our Master's judgment shall condemn us for not having more. First, then, God has made some men with few talents. You very often hear men speak of one another as if God had made no mental differences at all. One man finds himself successful, and he supposes that if everyone else could have been as industrious and as persevering as himself, everyone must necessarily have been as successful. You will often hear remarks against ministers who are godly and earnest men, but who do not happen to have much attracting power, and they are called drones and lazy persons, because they cannot make much of a stir in the world, whereas the reason may be that they have but little talent, and are making the best use of what they have, and therefore ought not to be rebuked for the littleness of what they are able to accomplish. It is a fact, which every man must see, that even in our birth there is a difference. All children are not alike precocious, and all men certainly are not alike capable of learning or of teaching. God hath made eminent and marvelous differences. We are not to suppose that all the difference between a Milton and a man who lives and dies without being able to read, has been caused by education. There was doubtless a difference originally, and though education will do much, it cannot do everything. Fertile ground, when well tilled, will necessarily bring forth more than the best tilled estate, the soil of which is hard and sterile. God has made great and decided differences, and we ought, in dealing with our fellow men, to recollect this, lest we should say harsh things of those very men to whom God will afterwards say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." But why is it that God has not given to all men like talents? My first answer shall be, because God is a sovereign, and of all attributes, next to his love, God is the most fond of displaying his sovereignty. The Lord God will have men know that he has a right to do what he wills with his own. Hence it is, that in salvation he gives it to some and not to others, and his only reply to any accusation of injustice is, "Nay, but O man, who art thou that repliest against God? Shall the thing formed say to him that formed it, Why hast thou made me thus?" The worm is not to murmur because God did not make it an angel, and the fish that swims the sea must not complain because it hath not wings to fly into the highest heavens. God had a right to make his creatures just what he pleased, and though men may dispute his right, he will hold and keep it inviolate against all comers. That he may hedge his right about and make vain man acknowledge it, in all his gifts he continually reminds us of his sovereignty. "I will give to this man," he says, "a mind so acute that he shall pry into all secrets. I will make another so obtuse that none but the plainest elements of knowledge shall ever be attainable by him. I will give to one man such a wealth of imagination, that he shall pile mountain upon mountain of imagery, till his language seems to reach to celestial majesty. I will give to another man a soul so dull, that he shall never be able to originate a poetic thought." Why this, O God? The answer comes back, "Shall I not do what I will with mine own?" So, then, the children being not yet born, neither having done good or evil, that the purpose of God according to election might stand, it was written, "The elder shall serve the younger." And so it is written concerning men, that one of them shall be greater than another, one shall bow his neck, and the other put his foot upon it, for the Lord hath a right to dispose of places and of gifts, of talents and wealth, just as seemeth good in his sight. Now, most men quarrel with this. But mark, the thing that you complain of in God, is the very thing that you love in yourselves. Every man likes to feel that he has a right to do with his own as he pleases. We all like to be little sovereigns. You will give your money freely and liberally to the poor, but if any man should impertinently urge that he had a claim upon your charity, would you give unto him? Certainly not, and who shall impeach the greatness of your generosity in so doing? It is even as that parable that we have in one of the evangelists, where, after the men had toiled, some of them 12 hours, some of them 6, and some of them but 1, the Lord gave every man a penny. Oh! I would meekly bow my head, and say, "My Lord, hast thou given me 1 talent? Then I bless thee for it, and I pray thee bestow upon me grace to use it rightly. Hast thou given to my brother 10 talents? I thank thee for the greatness of thy kindness towards him, but I neither envy him, nor complain of thee." Oh! For a spirit that bows always before the sovereignty of God. Again, God gives to one 5, and to another 2 talents, because the Creator is a lover of variety. It was said that order is heaven's first law, surely variety is the second, for in all God's works, there is the most beautiful diversity. Look ye towards the heavens at night, all the stars shine not with the same brilliance, nor are they placed in straight lines, like the lamps of our streets. Then turn your eyes below, see in the vegetable world, how many great distinctions there are, ranging from the cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop on the wall, or the moss that is smaller still. See how from the huge mammoth tree, that seems as if beneath its branches it might shade an army, down to the tiny lichen, God hath made everything beautiful, but everything full of variety. Look on any one tree, if you please, see how every leaf differs from its fellow, how even the little tiny buds that are at this hour bursting at the scent of the approaching perfume of spring, differ from each other, not 2 of them alike. Look again, upon the animated world, God hath not made every creature like unto another. How wide the range, from the colossal elephant, to the coney that burrows in the rock, from the whale that makes the deep hoary with its lashings, to the tiny minnow that skims the brook, God hath made all things different, and we see variety everywhere. I doubt not it is the same, even in heaven, for there are thrones, and dominions, and principalities, and powers, different ranks of angels, perhaps, rising tier upon tier. One star different from another star in glory. And why should not the same rule stand good in manhood? Doth God cast us all in the same mold? It seems not so, for he hath not made our faces alike, no two countenances can be said to be exactly the same, for if there be some likeness, yet is there a manifest diversity. Should minds, then, be alike? Should souls all be cast in the same fashion? Should God's creation dwindle down into a great manufactory, in which everything is melted in the same fire and poured into the same mold? No, for variety's sake, he will have one man a renowned David, and another David's unknown armor-bearer. He will have one man a Jeremy, who shall prophesy, and another a Baruch, who shall only read the prophecy. One shall be rich as Dives, another poor as Lazarus,